Hello, welcome to the Marriage Unmasked podcast today. We are talking about a humongous issue and something we've been, pondering a lot and really had it on our hearts to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're talking about faith, shame, and sex, what the church taught us today.
Yeah, we were both raised in churches, going to church every Sunday. Dads who are pastors, grandpas who are pastors. Adam used to be a
I
pastor.
was a pastor for several years.
And we love Jesus, obviously, and we love his church. We love, the big church of just all God's children. And this is not about blaming the church, but there are some messages that are out there, especially when you're talking about religion and you're talking about making a lot of rules and having to follow a lot of rules. And they're they're harmful. They can really hurt intimacy, and so we want to untangle those and replace them with God's truth. So if you've ever felt shame, pressure, confusion, I think all those things, I have heard couples struggling with these things where they're confused and they are struggling with a lot of hard emotions around sex and marriage because of what they were taught.
The messaging and the mindset and the thoughts that are surrounding that.
And so if that's you, you're not alone. And we are going to debunk some of those messages, untangle them, and really bring some truth in. So the first one is sex is for him, right? The message kind of out there. And I know some of these things, it's not like they're necessarily taught in sermons. Maybe they are. But that this messaging can come across from maybe your family, maybe literally in the church, that sex is for him. It's not really for her. It's for him. And
that's not biblical at all. There's nothing in the Bible that says sex is just for him. So I wonder where that even came from or why that even became a thing in kind of church and religious circles. But it definitely is out there, and it's definitely an assumption that's made.
And then women can end up feeling pressured to have sex with their husbands, even when they don't desire it, even when they're not comfortable with it. And that's absolutely not okay. And I think when you have that thought that sex is for him, you miss out as a woman on all the amazing, incredible pleasure that God has for you in your God-given sexuality and your relationship with your husband.
Yeah, I mean it's such a beautiful place where the masculine and feminine dynamic is expressed, and the way God intended it to be was for both husband and wife to really have this pleasure and this enjoyment, and to vibe off of each other in this area.
Yeah. The next one is, this common message of like good girls or good boys, they don't think about sex, right? I mean, how
Your thoughts, like you have your thoughts, your thinking. And what that is often meaning is that you can't think about sex at all. You can't have any thoughts. You're supposed to just kind of like force all thoughts of sexual anything out of your brain, which is unrealistic demand, really, honestly. And it's not, there isn't really, thinking about sex is not right or wrong necessarily. It is a gift that God has given us, and to think about it and to, like, sexual thoughts are not in and of themselves unholy or impure. And I think that impression is often given as if there's something wrong or dirty about sex itself.
Yes, yeah.
And that is an unhelpful message to give.
Yeah, and it can lead to so much shame. So you think that, because you are thinking about sex. I remember when I was like a teenage girl, maybe a little, I don't know if I was quite fully like 13, but around that age, and I was starting to think about sex more, and I was starting to, like, if I saw it in a movie, like, I was like, I could feel sensations in my body, and I desired, like, I wanted to learn more about it. I think probably because it was such a forbidden kind of topic.
Yeah, it's a taboo thing.
Right? And I think you as a sexual being, right? God created us. He gave us this God-given sexuality that we all have. and we are curious. We are, just like any other part of your body, or your brain, or your talents, your gifts, and you're curious about them. You want to learn about them, and if no one provides a safe space for you to do that, or has those conversations with you, you can begin to think about it in such a negative way. And also, then I remember feeling like this was something that was possibly wrong with me, or I was bad. This was forbidden. I shouldn't be doing it. I shouldn't be thinking about it. I shouldn't be watching it. And it can lead to so much shame. And
And I had some of that as well. I mean, just the idea of thinking about sex at all was just like, oh my goodness, no. And then I would internally shame myself when thoughts like that came up. And it's a very natural thing for, when you're in those growing years to start to have those desires and those feelings and those thoughts come up. And without, like Cara said, a proper framework and some guidance and some actual like safe space, like you said, to really talk through these things and understand them and be, like that's healthy. It's healthy to have that, to really understand yourself better and to enjoy these things that God has given us.
Yeah, another message that we kind of want to untangle is that your purity equals your worth. And I think this one can be so damaging, because your value and how loved you are does not depend on what you are doing. Those things do not equal each other, right? Being a Jesus follower, that is not a checklist. It's not,
Right.
I need to then do this. If I'm going to call myself a Christian, then I do this. This is how I behave. Oh, look at them. They're not doing that. Or like, it's not a competition. It's not a checklist. It's not based on, your value is not based on how well you follow the rules.
Yeah,
These rules.
That's really legalism. And there's, I would say, sort of in the church, there can be almost like a hypocritical sort of stance about that, because there can be certain things that are more legalistically, are particularly wrong or particularly bad. You really have to have rules around that. And there's other things that are kind of sort of let go, and even though the Bible does talk about those things too.
Yeah.
And so I think, church has, in many ways, has really built a fence and said, sexual things are very dangerous and we have to put it in a box. We have to be very careful about how we handle this. But then other sins are treated with a lot more kind of like a soft approach, and not so.
Or nobody talks about them.
Yeah. Nobody talks about them. I mean, like,
no one addresses them when they're happening. Yeah.
I'm gonna throw this out, like overeating. Like how many large church events don't you have where there's a lot of overeating happening? That's not so shameful to have that. And it's all, like, these are all things that God talks about, that God, but it's not about this like checklist. It's not about this right or wrong, these rules. It's really about, the heart of a Jesus follower wanting to honor him with the way you live.
Well, and really, these rules, or these, things that God has given us in the Bible, they are, he gives us these, especially around, like, sexuality and marriage and all that. They're for our best.
Yes.
Because when we choose into what he has set up for us, we're choosing into his best for us. It's not that we need to then beat ourselves up every time we don't get it right, that we tell ourselves, you're not good enough, or you should be ashamed of yourself. That is not it. That is, that's just not the way to go. And it's going to cause more and more issues, and I think even draw you away from God. And I think that's a tool that the enemy uses, really.
Shame, to use shame inside of you, and to partner with that shame and that beating yourself up over all these things.
Yeah, I mean, focusing on your external behavior over your relationship with Jesus,
right,
it's just not helpful.
And Jesus even talks about that when he talks about like a fruit tree, like where the tree produces fruit based on the kind of tree it is. that a Jesus follower is naturally, somebody who loves Jesus and is loved by Jesus, of course, is naturally producing fruit. You can't force a tree to produce fruit. You can't, yell at the tree or give it rules or something to make it produce fruit. That's actually not producing anything out of it.
Yeah.
You know, our following what Jesus wants is a natural product of a heart that is full of Jesus love. It's not something that's forced upon us or that we should shame ourselves and beat ourselves up about.
Yeah. The next message we want to untangle is that men struggle with lust, and so women have to prevent that. This one is, it kind of,
tough.
it really gets me because it places this burden on women to prevent men, in sin. And it's not someone else's responsibility to keep you from going outside of God's best for you. And so, it's a little wild to me actually on both sides, that men struggle with lust, that all men struggle with lust, right? And so you better, as a woman, you better cover up, you better, I think what it does really is it creates this really sad, it can create this really sad view a woman has of her own body, that this is something that is impure.
It has to be hidden behind everything.
Yeah, that you need to have some kind, you maybe even women feel shame about their own bodies, that they have, large breasts or, whatever. And so, they need to do everything in their power to cover that up, when that is the way God made them and it is beautiful. And then how can you, if you are in that mindset of like your body is impure and you need to hide, as a woman, how do you then flip a switch when you're married and now, oh, I'm going to celebrate my body and my husband, that is such a stretch, I think, for a woman to go from one extreme to the other. Just magically it should just happen. I just think that's really hard. That's a pressure put on women that I just think is a little bit, it's silly. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I think again, in relationship with someone who's in a relationship with Jesus can kind of check, like modesty can be something that is worked out between an individual believer and their Lord. I mean, like it really doesn't have to be something that is, because when you start to make all these rules and then you start to get the ruler out and say this is how long the skirt should be, like those kind of things, like that doesn't help anything. It's between that individual believer and the Lord. And he's more interested in the heart. He's not so interested in following particular exact behavior that is being outlined by other people. He just wants to have your heart.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
And so, like, there is something to be modest, but you're being modest in a way that resonates with your relationship with the Lord, and that might look different for different people.
I remember in college, there was a book popular. I don't know if it was so we went to a Christian college and a religious, I would say pretty religious. And there was a book going around about how you shouldn't kiss until you're married. And I didn't really grow up with too much of that kind of upbringing. And so I was like, whoa, like I had never heard of this concept before. But I did grow up thinking that I was really like very focused on the law. I was very focused on trying to be enough for God. I really missed a lot of God's love for me. And so I was like, oh, a rule that I should be following. Oh, oh my goodness, maybe I should start doing this. And I was really considering it, and if someone is like, if that's something you've decided, okay, great.
Right.
But, to make a rule up and then it be kind of like the standard, like, oh, everyone should be not kissing until they're married, or like this is somehow better.
Yeah.
You're somehow a better, Christian if you don't kiss your husband until you get married. Or
that could be applied to anything, that kind of thought. Then that's when you're kind of like in danger zone. If you're applying this thought that you are going to be some kind of better or superior Christian if you are following this particular guideline of this particular rule. That shows that you're kind of in the danger zone.
Yeah. Okay, so another one. This one is so sad to me because it's this silence where we don't really talk about pleasure. There's no real understanding. We come to marriage, and we're like, okay, well, I think this is going to be good. I think this is going to be pleasurable, but I don't really know my body. I don't really know what feels good. I don't really know what intimacy should look like other than I should do it, right? And so what are you supposed to do with that?
Like you're taught for so long that it's something that you should not do and should not experience and you should not have pleasure with. And then as soon as you're married, it's like you have to flip a switch. And now I'm supposed to enjoy this. And now this is going to be this amazing, beautiful thing. And so that can be kind of a jarring transition. If you
Really painful.
Painful,
and
yeah,
we experienced this. We experienced the pain of the silence around pleasure. And honestly, it was a little bit a different experience for both of us.
Yeah.
Why don't you share your
Sure. So this was our first night together.
Yep. Our wedding night.
Our wedding night.
And we were both virgins.
Yes. And there's a lot of anticipation and nervousness and excitement around, consummating the marriage. And so it didn't go as I would have hoped, basically, because I didn't know what to expect either. And and I think I had this idea in my head of performance. I have to perform this and I have to do really good and I have to be really good at this and then it's going to be amazing because of how I perform, which is really not a helpful thought. And I just remember having a lot of shame around it, because I didn't feel like the performance lived up. And it's funny because I talked to her later and she's like, "Oh, there's fine, there's nothing wrong." But I had this big shame spiral afterwards. And I actually remember getting up from bed and going and sitting by the window and just in so much sadness and pain and shame about it. I didn't perform very well. I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
And I had hyped it up so much to think that this was, I put a lot of pressure on myself that this had to be this great performance, and I didn't feel like it was. And she even said it was fine. It was good.
Yeah, it was really he had unrealistic expectations because he didn't know.
I didn't know.
He didn't know anything about it, and I remember talking to my mom. I don't know if it was the night before our wedding or whatever, but we, I asked her questions. She was answering. We were having this, great conversation.
Good, yeah.
And so we had talked about plenty of things. So I knew what to expect. And I was not bothered by this. But what I was bothered by, and I think this is the saddest part, is I wake up in the middle of the night and my husband is not in bed with me. My new husband.
First night.
Yeah. And I'm like, where is he? And I look and he's sitting by the window, like he said. And I was like, honey, what are you doing? And he wasn't really talking to me. It was this I'd never seen him like this.
Sure.
And it was just it was very disconnecting. So actually, in what should have been this beautiful connecting thing for us, our first night of being intimate together physically actually was very disconnecting and very sad and painful. And it's all because Adam did not, nobody explained to him. He didn't understand pleasure. He had shame around pleasure, even coming into
expectations. I had expectations that were unrealistic. And that sort of thing. So just a lot of not really knowing, because it was such a taboo topic that wasn't really discussed or talked about.
Yeah, and I think that another message that is kind of we want to untangle is just it goes along with that is this idea of well, if you're a virgin and you get married, and you're pure, and then you're married, your sex life is going to be great, and your intimacy is going to be just this wonderful thing, and it's like this sex-based prosperity gospel, well, if you do the right things, if you come into it then everything is beautiful.
That's how you get the blessing of God.
Yes.
You get the blessing of God by following the rules.
And I have talked to wives in pain about this exact thing where they are struggling right now with their sex life and they're having resentment or they're having just a lot of pain because it's not that they're struggling a lot and they did supposedly, follow the rules. And so this is actually a really harmful teaching.
It sets up expectation that is not realistic again.
Yeah. So, again, we want to follow what God has for us, in sex and marriage. Not because then we're good, we're gonna get something.
Christian, that's
yeah, we're we whatever, but because it is for our best. It is, it is wonderful for us. And there's no need for shame. There's no need for condemnation. In fact, what there's a need for, if we are choosing outside of his plan, or we make some mistakes or whatever, right? What we need is love. We need restoration. We need to come back close to God. And shame that's not what shame does. It separates.
Yeah, there's forgiveness there. These are all things, like any sin, whenever we step outside of what is God's best for us, and that shame and all of that can result. Well, there is forgiveness. There is forgiveness. There's compassion. There's mercy, and there's love from our God because of what Jesus has done for us.
Yeah,
and we need to remember that in this area of life, big time.
Yeah, I will never forget. I had a friend in college, and she wanted to tell me this giant secret that was just eating her up. And, I was like, what in the world? Like, I can't even imagine what this is. Well, it turns out, yeah, she had lost her virginity. And she just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. She had so much shame. It was heartbreaking, truly, and there is just no need for that. There is just no need for that kind of, and I know there's a lot of like, I felt the need to ask. I mean, I was a virgin, but like I felt the need to ask, like, well, would you still marry me if I wasn't a virgin? Like there's almost a need in a lot of, I think, Christian relationships where you feel like you have to ask that because it's like you're somehow going to be damaged goods. You're somehow going to be bringing something ugly into your marriage if you're not a virgin. And I just think that's really unhelpful. That is really unhelpful kind of thoughts and beliefs to have. And we got to see ourselves the way God sees us, right? You are loved. You are, and it reminds me of John 8.
Yeah, where Jesus is. I mean, the Pharisees drag this woman in front of Jesus who's caught in the act of adultery. And what should we do with this woman? The law says we should stone her. Like we should kill her. And Jesus responds to this woman who is caught in this sin. Like you think about how like terrifying that would be for her, how she would just be like in such shame and guilt and public embarrassment here.
And thinks she's about to die.
Yeah. And Jesus, he like bends down, he gets down on her level, he is compassionate. He he starts to just like draw in the sand. Like, and then
maybe he was writing I heart you.
Yeah, so I mean, and then he's like, well, any of you who's not guilty of sin, you can be the first to throw the stone at her. Like that is such a powerful, like he had deep compassion for this woman because that's why he was here. He was here to love on people who were sinners, and
which is all of us,
which is everybody. And so they went away, and he speaks to her with such compassion and such love, and asks, did anybody condemn you? Well, then I don't condemn you either. Like he has no condemnation for her. He is the perfect expression of God's love and compassion over somebody who, like we all do, deserve the opposite. And so it's such a beautiful reminder of that's how the Father sees us through Jesus. He sees us in this with such compassion and warmth and love, and not like this judgmental, shaming.
Yeah, we don't need to beat ourselves up when we step outside of God's plan.
Yeah, there is some godly sorrow that leads to repentance, the Bible says, and that's good, but it leads to repentance. And you don't want to stay there and just beat yourself up. That actually leads to that.
Call yourself
Yeah.
names.
Yep.
Think of yourself as less than, not see yourself the way that God sees you. And he calls you his own.
Yeah.
And he loves you. He is, like everything that you've gone through matters to him. He loves you completely, and it's not based on what you do or what you don't do. So, the impact of these kind of messages, it's huge. It's huge for your relationship in your marriage. It's huge for your pleasure and your sex and intimacy. It can bring guilt and shame into the bedroom, like we've talked about.
It cheats you out of so many of these good blessings that God intends in marriage. These good, beautiful, um, enjoyable blessings that God has for us in marriage, His best for us.
Yeah. It can lead to, struggles with pleasure and even how you communicate. And I know we walked through that too when we were first married. And I still sometimes, I was just telling Adam the other day, like, you're so much better at communicating about your desires and your needs and like what you want in sex. And I'm still a little bit like,
Shy.
yeah, like,
Shy around those
and
things.
so, but you need to have healthy communication, or how does your spouse, please you? How do they know?
Yeah.
And so it is so important, but there can be so much lack in that area because you have like these thoughts and beliefs around it. And so there could also be, resentment, and this whole idea of like duty sex where I have to have sex with him because he wants it and that's what a good wife does. And these things are they can lead to major emotional disconnection in the relationship.
You're sacrificing what you actually are wanting and needing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're actually sacrificing that, and almost doing damage to your own heart then.
Yeah.
In that. So duty sex is not something God wants us.
Yeah. And then there's
His best for us.
Then there's porn and that whole struggle with that, because that can lead you into this shame spiral. If you feel like you have to keep this secret because you're so horrible, because you're so messed up, because you're so sinful, and then you do it in secret and and you don't reach out and get the help that you need. So that can be a whole nother damaging part of the marriage. And so we want to just encourage you, invite so much love in. And really, my biggest encouragement is to identify one belief that you have, one of these kind of unhelpful, beliefs or messages that you have about sex that you want to reframe. And then if there's any shame, uncover that shame, allow yourself to ask God how he sees you, and start that process of healing and communicate about it openly with your spouse. Share these things, and you don't need to share them with any kind of shame, because you are loved, and it doesn't make you any less than, or
Yeah, your identity is not in what you do or what you've done. Your identity is a perfect love child of God because of Jesus.
And if you need any help, please reach out to us. We love to walk through healing with couples, individually or together. We want to see you restored. We want to see you, really close to God's love. We want to see you inviting more of his love in, and accepting what he says about you and what he thinks about you. If you guys have any questions, I'm sure this brought up a lot for you. Please, we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Reach out, send us a message. We'd love for you to share this podcast on social media to get the message out about this freedom from shame and inviting in more pleasure and more intimacy into marriage and into the whole conversation about sex.